Welcome back to the Dragon Den, my loyal Dragonites. King of Dragons 5000 is back with another action figure review. Today we'll be taking a look at the Hiya Toys Godzilla vs. Kong Version 2 Godzilla. And before we have a look at the figure, let's take a moment to thank today's sponsor. This video is sponsored by Gundamit.com. Action figures, model kits, and other collectibles, check out Gundamit.com with a link in the description. And so here we have Godzilla posed and out of the packaging, and unfortunately he doesn't come with any accessories. So with that out of the way, let's move on to his details. Godzilla here is using the exact same mold that we saw with the King of the Monsters Godzilla. Despite having the exact same mold, there are some differences here, especially with the paint job. This Godzilla does not have that brown wash that we saw on that previous figure, and it does make the figure look completely different. Because it is the exact same mold, Godzilla will have that very impressive head sculpt. The scales are done very nicely here on Godzilla, and I especially love the way his eyes are painted on. The scales on his mouth are done very well, and it does hinge open so you can see his tongue and the fleshy parts on the inside of his mouth. He still has that very white neck that is iconic for the monsterverse Godzilla. And you can see he does have his gills, which are still sculpted beautifully, and I don't know the paint technique that they're using here, but it does highlight the details really nicely. Godzilla's body is still done in that really impressive light charcoal color, and you can see they did add some subtle brown shading here on his torso. On his chest there is some subtle shading with that brown, but there's also some grayish blue thrown on his chest. His arms still carry over that impressive detail, and the subtle shading here highlights his scales perfectly. You can see how much detail went into his arms, going all the way down to the claws at the end of his fingers. Godzilla still has those massive thighs, which are done beautifully because they utilize that impressive sculpt. And once again, subtle paint here on his thighs brings out all those impressive scale details. And the impressive sculpt work goes all the way down to his feet, where once again we have those really impressive claws which are sculpted beautifully. And because he does use the King of the Monsters mold, the dorsal plates on this Godzilla have a lot of crisp details on them. The dorsal plates are done very nicely, however, because he doesn't have as much paint wash on him, you do lose some of the details on this figure. Granted, there is some subtle paint on his dorsal plates, it's just not enough to bring out all that fantastic details. Godzilla's charcoal color scheme does go all the way down to his tail, and once again we have some really subtle brown shading throughout his tail. The dorsal plates still continue that impressive detail, so Godzilla's tail has a lot of impressive sculpt work here. Despite using the King of the Monsters mold, this Godzilla still has some impressive detail, even though he is lacking that brown wash that we saw on that previous figure. So with his impressive details out of the way, let's get Godzilla compared to our usual suspects. Here we have Godzilla posed next to a Marvel Legends Cyclops and DC Multiverse Superman, Mattel's WWE Elite Series and Mezco's 1/12 Collective Popeye the Sailor Man, the Lightning Collection White Ranger, and the Star Wars Black Series Mandalorian. And finally we have the GVK Version 2 Godzilla posed next to the GVK Version 1 Godzilla and the King of the Monsters Godzilla. So as you can see, despite being the exact same character, Hiya Toys has managed to give us 3 different versions of this base form Godzilla. So with the comparisons out of the way, let's have a look at Godzilla's articulation. Godzilla has a ball joint in the head and a ball joint in the neck. His jaw is on a hinge. Arms go out to the side slightly and do a full 360. Swivel hinge at his elbows. Ball joints in his wrists. Double ball joint in his mid-torso. Legs are on ball joints which do kick forward, go back, out to the side, and have slight rotation. A slight double bend in his knee. Ball joints in his ankles. And finally we have a multi-segmented tail which is full of segmented ball joints. So Godzilla will have the exact same articulation that we saw in that King of the Monsters and all previous Godzillas. All the articulation works perfectly here for Godzilla, and it's what you've come to expect out of Hiya Toys. So with everything said and done, let's get Godzilla posed for my final thoughts. The Hiya Toys Godzilla vs. Kong Version 2 Godzilla is a great update to that original Godzilla figure. Godzilla is utilizing that impressive King of the Monsters sculpt, and I have to say that the paintwork on this Godzilla is done beautifully. Add to it, this Godzilla seems to be a lighter charcoal than previous Godzilla figures, so there is a lot of differences here in terms of paint. This is a great Godzilla figure for every Godzilla collector, and if you missed out on that very first Godzilla figure, no need to fear, as this is a much better figure. And to be quite honest, because he is lacking that brown wash that we saw in the King of the Monsters Godzilla, he does look much cleaner. It's really up to you which version of Godzilla you prefer, whether it's the King of the Monsters or the GVK version 2 Godzilla. With the amount of sculpt and detail that went into Godzilla by Hiya Toys, it's pretty hard to say which one is the definitive version. However, if you prefer Godzilla with a much more subtle paint job and cleaner paint application, this is probably the version to pick up. The only downside to this particular version of Godzilla is that he is starting to sell out at multiple retails. At the time I'm making this video, he is sold out on sites like Big Bad Toy Store and Gundamit.com. So if you are lucky enough to pick this figure up, definitely check out the version 2 Godzilla from Godzilla vs. Kong. So before we wrap up this video, let's take a moment to thank today's sponsor, Gundamit.com. Gundamit.com has a huge selection of first-party and third-party action figures, model kits, and other collectibles. Show your support for the Dragon Den by using code word DRAGON and earn extra points on every purchase. So with that being said, don't forget to like this video, leave a comment, subscribe to my channel, and check out all my other Hiya Toys Godzilla videos. Check out my Instagram account for new and exciting action figure photos, videos, recent pickups, latest prints, and as always, ring that bell so you never miss another video. And until next time, my fellow Dragonites coming for the Dragon Den, I'm KingofDragons 5000 reminding you to redesign, rebuild, and reclaim. I'll see you next time.